It didn't begin with an explosion or a warning, just a tiny flash that almost no one noticed. And then all of Europe dropped into a cold, breathless void. When the power grid collapsed in just a few short seconds, every city that once bragged about its modern comfort suddenly looked terrifyingly fragile. Trains froze in the middle of tunnels, elevators hung suspended between floors, water plants shut down, storefronts slammed shut, and smartphones instantly turned into nothing more than dead weight. People stood in the dark with no idea what had happened, and even less idea of how long it would last. And in that silence, thick like fog, many finally saw the truth we've been avoiding. One single broken connection is enough to reveal that the modern world is just an empty shell. But what made that moment even more haunting was the helplessness spreading like a cold draft. Food slowly spoiling in the fridge, water pressure dropping hour by hour, neighbors locked behind silent doors, and information, the very thing that defines this era, vanishing completely. And when people lifted their phones for the 10th time, knowing full well no signal would appear, they were forced to confront a question no one wants to face. If everything you depend on disappeared tonight, would you actually know how to survive? If you've watched until this point, think about it. How would you react if the next blackout didn't last a few minutes, but an entire night? When the skies over Europe went dark, what terrified people wasn't the darkness itself, but the truth revealed right after. We've been living our whole lives relying on things we never truly controlled. Within just a few hours of blackout, systems that once felt unshakable collapsed instantly. Water stopped running, food began to spoil, families huddled inside freezing apartments as phone screens dimmed and batteries dropped percent by percent like a countdown clock. What suffocates the modern mind is that hollow feeling when nothing is there to support us. No stable temperature, no artificial light, no familiar hum of pumps or refrigerators. Every comfort suddenly becomes proof of the dependency we've always denied. And when real night finally settled in, the fear didn't come from outside. It came from realizing how deeply we've gotten used to being served, how a single malfunction can make an entire society seize up like a machine missing a vital gear. It's bitter to accept that what we call stability is really just a thin layer of paint over a fragile frame. If you ever believed one power surge couldn't shake your life, try imagining this. That night wasn't the disaster. It was only the first warning. The strangest irony of a blackout isn't the darkness swallowing the city. It's the fact that we treat it like a catastrophe. While for a medieval peasant, it was simply the rhythm of everyday life. A modern person loses power for 3 hours and already feels restless, anxious, checking their phone over and over, as if the glow inside that screen is what keeps them alive. Meanwhile, a medieval peasant stepped into 5 months of winter darkness without a single tremor, because to them, night wasn't an enemy. It was just another shape of existence. They didn't try to banish the dark. They lived with it, read it, sensed it like a childhood companion. And here's the twist that leaves most modern people stunned. In medieval Europe, darkness was never the threat. The real danger was the one who failed to store enough food, didn't stack enough firewood, didn't know how to keep embers alive through the night. Darkness didn't kill anyone. Carelessness did. When the sun set at 4 in the afternoon and didn't rise again until nearly 8 the next morning, they didn't complain, didn't wait for a signal, didn't hope for rescue. They lived by a simple rule. Light comes from fire, and survival comes from habit. A single weak tallow candle was enough to cook, mend clothes, watch children, tell stories. One ember kept glowing under ash was worth more than any device in our hands today. And that contrast exposes just how fragile we've become. We fear the dark because we've forgotten how to live in it. If you've read this far, answer one simple question. If the power really went out tonight, would you be the kind of person who isn't afraid of the dark? Or the kind who simply isn't prepared? What set medieval people apart from us wasn't their endurance. It was the way they turned darkness into a structured part of life. When natural light disappeared, they didn't fight to stretch the day at all costs the way we do now. Instead, they adjusted their bodies, their work, even their emotions to the rhythm of the sun. They didn't race against time. They lived inside it. And because of that, the few lighting tools they had were more than enough. The glow of the hearth, a slow burning tallow candle, even moonlight reflecting off snow, became a natural flashlight for chores or finding their way home. What's fascinating is that they didn't see darkness as a lack of something, but as a kind of structure. In a small house, the hearth at the center acted like a beating heart, cooking, lighting, and setting the pace of daily life. Every object had a fixed place, so a simple touch was enough to know what you were holding. No eyesight needed. The earth walls, thatched roof, and tiny windows kept warmth so effectively that even a faint firelight could keep an entire family alive through winter. This ability still shocks modern people. While we depend on electric bulbs for every tiny task, medieval peasants could read the dark the way you read a map. And because of that harmony, they didn't fear long nights. They only feared wasting an ember or losing a candle. If you've watched this far, ask yourself, are we truly weaker than they were? Or have we just been dependent for too long? If you imagine medieval people shivering in flimsy huts through the winter, you'd be stunned to learn that their homes were actually a kind of primitive thermal weapon, so effective that many modern buildings don't even come close. To start, countless houses were built half sunk into the ground, not because of poverty, but because the damp soil acted like a natural insulation shield, keeping indoor temperatures stable even when the outside wind cut like a blade. Their walls were made of wattle and daub, a mix of clay, straw, and animal dung that sounds crude, yet had astonishing heat retention, in many cases better than the concrete walls we live in today. The roofs were low and steep not only to handle snow, but to trap warm air from escaping. Every tiny gap was sealed with moss, grass, or cloth, turning the entire house into a massive heat-holding chamber. Straw wasn't just bedding, it was insulation everywhere, under the roof, on the floors, around the doors. And the most shocking part is this. They survived brutal, months-long winters using the very materials we call trash. Earth, straw, dung, stone. No technology, no heaters, just experience and instinct. So here's the real question. If those humble materials kept entire families alive through blizzards, while we can't endure a single night without electricity, then who actually understood how to fight the cold? Among all the survival secrets the Middle Ages left behind, nothing is as quiet and as astonishing as the way they created lightless fire. a form of heating so discreet and so effective, it almost sounds mythical. At night, when temperatures dropped low enough to freeze breath mid-air, they didn't burn big open flames the way we imagine today. A bright fire could attract predators, alert strangers, or waste fuel that was worth more than gold. Instead, they heated large stones in the hearth until they glowed red, then buried them under ash or wrapped them in thick cloth and tucked them under beds, inside built-in benches, or beneath packed earth floors. Those stones radiated heat for hours, gentle, steady, and completely invisible, like a hidden fire spirit sleeping under the soil, keeping the family alive through the long night. Some homes even built stone channels beneath sleeping areas, so the warmth from those stones traveled through the floor like an early form of geothermal heating. No machinery, no light, no rising smoke. Just a soft, stable heat so perfectly engineered that modern engineers still marvel at how precise it was. But the most mysterious part was how they preserved embers through the night. Buried deep in ash, a single glowing coal could survive from dusk until dawn, needing only one breath in the morning to burst back into flame. It wasn't just a technique. It felt like a silent ritual, as if they gave their warmth to the fire, so it could give life back to them the next day. If you've listened this far, leave a comment. Which impressed you the most? The lightless fire, the heat-holding stones, or the ember that stays alive for 12 hours? In a medieval winter, what determined a family's survival wasn't strength or bravery. It was the ability to keep food from spoiling. It sounds simple, but for them, every ruined slab of meat, every jar of butter that melted, every sack of grain that turned damp could mean one child not making it through the season.
Over here, look.
A root cellar wasn't just storage. It was the thin border between life and death, a place where every mistake carried a cost measured in time, labor, and sometimes lives. A rise of just a few degrees from an unexpected warm wind could turn smoked meat brown in 24 hours. A sudden thaw near the end of January could transform 3 months' worth of food into the smell of decay overnight. So they calculated everything with obsessive precision, burying turnips in dry sand, hanging meat high enough to escape moisture, sealing clarified butter in clay jars, placing apples in ventilated gaps so one rotten fruit wouldn't infect the rest. Every item was positioned so cold air could slip in, but frost could never reach it. In that world, every jar of oil, every braid of dried onions, every strip of smoked meat carried the weight of weeks of survival. And the most terrifying truth was this: no one got the chance to make the same mistake twice. If you've made it this far, tell me, what's more frightening to you? The cold outside the door, or the price of one small misstep inside the root cellar? In a world without electricity, without doorbells, without screens lighting up every time a message arrives, medieval people still communicated using signals so precise they would shock any modern person. A weak tallow candle wasn't meant to light the room. It was a sign to the village that life was still inside that home. A knock at the door at midnight wasn't courtesy. It was a warning of danger. A horn echoing from the edge of the village could mean joy, tragedy, or a signal that something was moving through the tree line. And the most remarkable part is that they didn't need bright light. They relied on routine and memory. Every family knew each other's footsteps, recognized silhouettes in the dark, recognized the scent of smoke rising from each hearth. They didn't depend on devices. They depended on the sharpness of their senses. On the outskirts, carefully controlled smoke plumes signaled neighboring villages when a fire broke out or when the hunting party was returning. A scrap of metal catching moonlight could send a message farther than any dead phone ever could. And it was exactly this simplicity that made the system so durable. The fewer things you depend on, the harder it is for everything to collapse. If you've read this far, ask yourself, in absolute darkness, would you search for light or listen for the signal? In a medieval village, survival wasn't a test of strength. It was a test of reputation, and anyone who forgot that rule quickly became a ghost. The community quietly left behind. Back then, the selfish weren't taken to court, fined, or yelled at. They were simply left to die. Refuse to share firewood when the cold winds swept down the valley. Skip your part when the communal granary needed its roof patched. Fail to bring bread to the widow in the final weeks of winter. Just one mistake. Like that was enough for every door to close on you forever. This wasn't cruelty. It was survival policy. In a world where a jar of fat or a bundle of onions could save an entire family, the community was the security system, the bank, the insurance, and the army, an invisible but brutally strict network. Those who were reliable were protected, those who weren't were erased. And here comes the twist that chills most people when they hear it. Survival in the Middle Ages wasn't built on strength. It was built on reputation. One promise kept could save your winter. One promise broken could make the whole village treat you as good as dead. Because when the blizzard hit, nobody survived alone.
Over here.
Nobody could rebuild a roof at midnight or search for a lost cow in the depths of the forest by themselves. Everyone depended on each other, or everyone paid the price together. If you've watched this far, leave a comment. What's truly stronger, muscle or reputation? If you think a blackout is just a temporary inconvenience, try imagining a scenario far more familiar than you'd expect. The lights blink out again, but this time there's no restoration notice, no weather alert, no engine hum in the distance. Only cold darkness, silence, and that helpless feeling slipping into each breath. That is the moment when modern people finally understand why medieval villagers prepared by seasons, by years, sometimes by generations, while we prepare by the hour. In a modern apartment, when the fridge dies, the water pressure drops and your phone hits 9%. Panic starts circling like a trapped bird. But place yourself inside a medieval home at that same moment, and the scene transforms completely. The room is still warm thanks to stones heated earlier in the day. A pot of soup simmers gently over glowing embers. Roots, dried vegetables, and cured meat rest safely in the cellar. A small tallow candle lights just enough space to see one another. And most importantly, you're not alone, because you're part of a network where everyone knows their role when things go wrong. The difference is in the architecture of life itself. They built systems designed to endure collapse. We built systems assuming collapse would never happen. And that's the greatest lesson of all. Resilience isn't strength. It's a habit forged long before everything goes dark. If you've watched this far, leave a comment sharing what you'd prepare. First for the next blackout. And if you want to learn the skills our ancestors used to survive the longest winters, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story.